Trip. Tens of thousands of Wall Streeters have lost their jobs over the past year, and banks aren't exactly hiring. We know that. But one industry is, and that's the government. Sandra Smith talking to job seekers at the New York Society of Securities Analysts job fair, which targets, Sandra, people who are out of work on Wall Street.
Yeah, Liz, and I had to grab one of the job seekers that I just walked by. He was at the FDIC table, and on his name tag, Andrew Friedman, it said Bear Stearns. And I said, oh my gosh, well, he said his name was still listed with Bear Stearns in this system. Andrew, you've got an amazing story. You were an analyst at Bear Stearns for 10 years, and now I find you here looking for a job with one of these government agencies.
That's correct.
Why is this?
Well, Wall Street does not have the pull that it once had. On one hand, if you look at the private sector, things seem to be shrinking, firms are merging, so there are really fewer opportunities out there in the private sector. The flip side is the government sector is really growing because you need more oversight. There's billions and billions of dollars being pumped into the oversight sector.
And Andrew, somebody might look at you and say, you were a Wall Street analyst for 10 years. You were making the big bucks. Are you going to look at a pay cut if you take one of these government jobs today?
Well, at the same time, you're looking at a pay cut even in the private sector. Even working on Wall Street, the bonuses are not what they used to be. The salaries are not what they used to be. So people are really making a fraction of what they used to make. At this point in my life, I'm not looking to get rich anymore. I pretty much need enough to keep me happy. And you know, I really want to make something of myself, do something ambitious. In a way, it's a chance to do something new and open my horizons.
Yeah, and I'm going to have to toss it back to Liz in the studio, but real quick question, what's the average salary of these government jobs?
From what I've seen, a lot of them do pay in the six figures. So depending on your qualifications, they do need people from the private sector. They need that skill set. They're
looking for good Wall Street talent out there.
Exactly, and they're willing to pay, and there's still a lot of benefits if you work for the government.
So Liz, there's a lot of pluses here, and Andrew Friedman's just one of a lot of the stories that we've heard here on the floor today. But this room's been packed all day, and you know, the government agencies here, they're hiring, and a lot of the Wall Streeters here, former Wall Streeters, they're willing to make the transition.
Sandra, this is easily one of the most interesting job fairs you've brought us. Thank you very much. Good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, end the Fed, that's what our next guest will be calling for as the keynote speaker at the End the Fed rally here in New York City tomorrow. Joining us now, Peter Schiff, president of Euro-Pacific Capital. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Liz. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm sure the Fed finds this mildly amusing and doesn't believe it would ever come to much, but why do you find it a really serious issue?
Well, it is serious. And, you know, it's not just this one rally in New York. They're having simultaneous rallies at every city that has a Federal Reserve Bank and in Washington, D.C. And, you know, the bottom line is the Fed is chiefly responsible for the predicament that our country finds itself in, and the Federal Reserve is not living up to its original mission. I mean, first of all, when we first established the Federal Reserve back in 1913, you know, Federal Reserve notes were notes. They weren't dollars. They were promises by the Fed to pay gold. So if you had a 20 in 1913, you didn't have $20. You had 20 Federal Reserve notes, which meant you could go to the Fed and get dollars, which were gold and silver. And also, when we initially created the Fed was supposed to give us an elastic money supply. And what that means is that when the economy is expanding, money supply grows. When the economy is contracting, money supply shrinks. But instead, what we have is a Fed that every time the money supply the economy contracts, they print even more money, and they're blowing one asset bubble after another.
But Peter,
so we need to abolish the Fed.
But Peter, the Fed and people who support it would say we're here to stabilize what, as we saw in September, can be a very volatile system of banking.
But remember, Liz, they didn't stabilize it. They destabilized it in the first place. You know, that's the destabilizing factor. They kept interest rates too low. They got everybody drunk. Now we're putting them in charge. It doesn't make any sense. And of course, you know, there's a bill now to try to audit the Fed that many members in Congress are actually supporting, introduced by Ron Paul. But at least we have some right at this point to know what these guys are doing because they operate in secrecy behind closed doors. The original reason was that they had to be independent. And the Federal Reserve is a private banking syndicate. It is not officially part of the government. It was supposed to be independent, and it was given powers that the government itself does not have, like the ability to issue paper money. The government does not have that ability, so the Fed was able to do it, but it was doing it because the money was backed, or the notes were backed by gold.
Well,
but they're not living up to their original mission, and they're doing a lot of damage to our economy.
Well, last night, Dave Ramsey had the special here on Fox Business, Your Money, Your Hope, talking about the real hope of what we should do. And he's talked specifically about allowing failure and how it's an okay thing to let companies that don't do the job properly to fail. But what we've seen is Treasury and the Federal Reserve definitely pumping near-failing companies like Citi full of money so that they look like they're in the pink of health.
Absolutely, Liz. Bankruptcy is a healthy part of capitalism. Bankruptcy is the market's way of purging the economy from unprofitable businesses that are destroying wealth. We need companies that are insolvent, that are not generating profits, to go bankrupt.
So you don't buy the theory that had we, let's say, an AIG, this is what we keep hearing, there would have been massive systemic risk?
Well, look, there's no doubt that there would have been big problems, but the problems are going to be worse because we bailed them out. And, what kind of nation do we want to live in? Look at the results of this investigation in New York, where we find that Ben Bernanke and Henry Paulson, working together, pressured Bank of America to go on with this the acquisition of Merrill Lynch and not divulging to their shareholders the concerns that they had and the losses at Merrill Lynch. If you remember, I was on your program when they announced this deal, and I said there's got to be something going on behind the scenes. Why would Bank of America buy Merrill Lynch? It made no sense, and now we know. And if they're talking about securities fraud on the part of Bank of America, it's got to be worse. Sure. For Bernanke and Paulson, because not only should they be indicted for securities fraud, but abuse of power. Well, do we want to be in a situation where our government officials can pressure people to do things that they're not supposed to do? Well,
you did say that on our program here on Fox Business several times, and people are so critical now of the media, but we did give you a voice there, Peter. Thank you for coming on. The rally is called End the Fed. It's tomorrow in various cities across the United States. Peter, you're going to be the keynote speaker at the one here in New York. Thank you for joining us.
And if you're in the New York area, come on down and protest with us.
Where is it?
It's in, I forget the name of the park. There's a march from the Federal Reserve. I know. I'm speaking at 3:30, though, so I can...
That's all he knows. He's one of those focused people, kind of linear thinking. Thank you, Peter. We'll see you later. 10 minutes. Where's City Hall? City Hall in New York City. Okay, the closing bell ringing in 10 minutes. Get ready for a weekend with Warren. Next weekend, starting Friday.